I'm going to put dirt on your foot, and you're going to walk, the boy said seconds later, and the miracle happens. Santiago Ramirez had been confined to a wheelchair for 3 years, with no doctor able to explain the real reason why. The 12-year-old boy had lost movement in his legs after the tragic accident that also took his mother's life, and since then he refused to accept any treatment or any hope of improvement. It was during a sunny afternoon in the garden of the family mansion in Monterrey that an unknown boy appeared out of nowhere. Miguel looked about 10 years old, his clothes stained with dirt, and his bare feet revealing a life completely different from Santiago's luxurious reality. Without asking permission, the boy approached and knelt in front of the wheelchair. "I'm going to put dirt on your foot, and you're going to walk," Miguel repeated with a conviction that left everyone frozen. Santiago stared at the boy with a mix of surprise and irritation. For 3 years, he had heard empty promises from doctors, physiotherapists, and specialists from all over the world. Why did this dirty, ragged child think he could do something the best professionals couldn't? "Get out of here, kid," Santiago muttered, trying to turn the wheelchair away. But Miguel didn't move. Instead, he began digging into the damp soil of the garden with his hands, gathering handfuls of dark mud between his fingers. "You need to trust me," the boy said, looking straight into Santiago's eyes. "My grandmother taught me that the earth has healing power when someone is lost within themselves." From the mansion's terrace, Eduardo Ramirez watched the scene with growing irritation. The 62-year-old businessman had spent the last 3 years of his life and a considerable fortune trying to give his grandson the ability to walk again. Seeing a street kid making impossible promises enraged him. "Carmen!" Eduardo shouted at the maid. "Get this boy out of here before I call security." But Santiago raised his hand, asking his grandfather to wait. Something in Miguel's determined gaze awakened a curiosity he hadn't felt in a long time. "How do you know you can help me?" Santiago asked, his voice full of skepticism, but also with a hint of hope he tried to hide. "Because I've already seen people like you," Miguel replied, shaping the dirt in his small hands. "People who stop walking not because the body is broken, but because the heart hurts so much that it forgets how to tell the legs to move." The brutal simplicity of the explanation hit Santiago like a punch in the stomach. No doctor had ever talked about heart pain. Everyone insisted on exams, surgeries, and treatments that he knew deep down would never work. "You lost someone very important, didn't you?" Miguel continued, now rubbing the soil between his fingers. "And since that person left, you decided it wasn't worth trying anymore." Santiago felt his eyes fill with tears, which he quickly tried to hide. How could this unknown boy read his pain so precisely? "My mom," Santiago began, but his voice failed. "She wouldn't want you to stay like this, trapped," Miguel said softly. "Grandma always says that the ones who leave want us to be happy, not to stop living." Eduardo walked down the terrace steps with firm strides, ready to expel the intruder. But when he got closer and heard the conversation, something made him hesitate. For 3 years, he hadn't seen his grandson show any genuine emotion, anger, sadness, hope. Everything had been buried along with his daughter. "Boy, where do you come from?" Eduardo asked, trying to keep an authoritative tone but failing. "I live over there in the neighborhood behind the hill," Miguel replied, pointing beyond the mansion walls. "My grandma takes care of sick people that doctors can't help. She sent me here because she said there was a boy who needed special help." "What do you mean your grandma sent you?" "Nobody here knows your grandma," Eduardo said, confused. "She knows you," Miguel replied naturally. "She worked at the hospital when your mom was admitted. She was the one who cared for her in her final days." A deafening silence followed. Eduardo felt his legs shake. Isabel, his daughter, had spent her final days in a private clinic, surrounded by the best professionals. He didn't remember any nurse in particular. "What's your grandma's name?" Eduardo asked, his voice hoarse. "Benita Lopez," Miguel answered. "But everyone calls her Doña Benita." Eduardo closed his eyes and pressed his hand to his forehead. He vaguely remembered an older nurse who had insisted they should let Santiago spend more time with his mother, even when she was unconscious. The doctors had advised against it, saying it would be too traumatic for a child. He had followed the doctor's advice and kept his grandson away. "She was fired," Eduardo murmured, memories crashing back like a wave. The doctor said she was interfering with the treatment. "She wasn't fired for interfering," Miguel said, with an impressive wisdom for his age. "They sent her away because she told the truth nobody wanted to hear." Santiago looked between his grandfather and Miguel, trying to understand what was happening. The tension in the air was palpable, as if old secrets were being unearthed, along with the dirt Miguel kept shaping. "What truth?" Santiago asked, his voice barely a whisper. Miguel stopped moving the dirt and looked directly at him. "The truth that you stopped walking because you blame yourself for the fight you had with your mom on the day of the accident. The truth that you stopped walking because you blame yourself for the fight you had with your mom on the day of the accident," Miguel said. "Grandma said you shouted that you hated her because she was going to travel without you, and now you believe that if you manage to walk again, you'll be betraying her memory." The words struck Santiago like a blow. How on earth had he never told anyone about that fight? Not his grandfather, not doctors, not psychologists. How could this boy know? I didn't," Santiago stammered, his emotional defenses collapsing. "Your mother left a letter," Miguel said simply. "Grandma kept it all these years, waiting for the right moment to deliver it." Eduardo and Santiago stared at the boy as if he had spoken in a foreign language. "What letter?" Eduardo asked, his voice trembling. "The letter she wrote, asking for forgiveness for the fight and saying how much she loved both of you," Miguel explained. "She asked Grandma to deliver it when you were ready to forgive yourself." Santiago began to cry for the first time in 3 years. Not the silent crying he allowed himself at night, but deep sobs rising from the very bottom of his soul. Eduardo knelt beside the wheelchair and hugged his grandson, his own tears mixing with the boys. "Can I try now?" Miguel asked gently, showing his hands full of dirt. Santiago nodded through tears. Miguel carefully removed the boy's shoes and socks, revealing feet that hadn't touched the ground in 3 years. The soil was warm and damp, fitting perfectly around the contour of Santiago's feet. "Now close your eyes and think of your mother smiling," Miguel instructed. "Not the fight, not the accident. Think of her smile when you did something that made her proud." Santiago obeyed, and immediately an image appeared in his mind, his mother clapping when he learned to ride a bike at 5 years old. Her radiant smile, her arms open, the way she said, "My champion," when he reached her pedaling. And only then it happened. A strange tingling began in Santiago's toes, first soft, then stronger, like thousands of tiny needles awakening sleeping nerves. "I can feel it," Santiago whispered, his eyes still closed. "I can feel my feet." Eduardo watched in absolute shock. For 3 years, he had spent hundreds of thousands of pesos on treatments, and now a street boy was achieving results with handfuls of garden dirt. "Try moving your toes," Miguel said calmly, as if miracles were routine in his life. Santiago focused all his energy on his feet. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the big toe on his right foot moved, then the left. Then all the toes began to move slightly, breaking 3 years of immobility. "My God," Eduardo murmured, dropping to his knees. "How is this possible?" "The earth connects us to life," Miguel explained, smiling for the first time. "And sometimes life only needs to remind the body how to work." Dear listener, If you're enjoying the story, take a moment to leave your like and, above all, subscribe to the channel. That helps us a lot, especially those of us who are just starting out. Continuing, Doña Carmen, the family employee who had worked in the mansion for 15 years, witnessed everything from the kitchen window, ran to the phone, and called Dr. Alberto, the family's doctor, describing the impossible thing she had just seen. Dr. Alberto Fernandez arrived in less than an hour, skeptical but intrigued by Doña Carmen's urgent call. He had followed Santiago's case from the beginning and knew there was no physical injury that explained the paralysis. When he saw the boy moving his toes, he almost dropped his medical bag on the floor. "This is impossible," the doctor murmured, kneeling to examine Santiago's feet. "Santiago, are you really feeling what I'm doing?" The doctor lightly touched the soles of the boy's feet, and Santiago immediately reacted to the stimulus. "Yes, doctor," Santiago exclaimed, his eyes glowing in a way no one had seen in years. "It tickles." Dr. Alberto looked at Eduardo with a completely baffled expression. In 15 years of medicine, he had never seen such a sudden recovery in psychological cases. "Boy," the doctor said, turning to Miguel, "where did you learn this technique?" "My grandmother," Miguel replied simply. "She always says the body and the mind are connected by invisible threads, and when one breaks from sadness, we need to find another way to reconnect it." Dr. Alberto shook his head, trying to process what he had just witnessed. His scientific training fought against the evidence right in front of his eyes. "Eduardo, we need to do exams immediately," the doctor said. "I want to understand what's happening neurologically." "Doctor," Miguel interrupted, "the exams are going to show he could always walk. The problem was never in his body." "How can you be so sure?" Dr. Alberto asked. "Because my grandma taught me to see the difference between a broken body and a wounded soul," Miguel replied. "Santiago has a wounded soul. Now that he has begun to heal inside, his body will remember how to work." Eduardo felt torn between gratitude and distrust. As a successful businessman, he was used to controlling situations, but this was completely beyond his understanding. "Boy, where exactly do you live?" Eduardo asked. "I want to talk to your grandmother." "In the Esperanza neighborhood, in the blue house, with a yard full of plants," Miguel answered. "But she said she'll only talk to you when Santiago manages to take at least 3 steps. Only why?" Santiago asked. "Because she wants to make sure you truly decided to live again," Miguel explained. "She said there's no point forcing someone to get better if they don't truly want to." That answer deeply touched Eduardo. Over the last 3 years, he had forced his grandson to participate in dozens of treatments against his will. Maybe this was the first time Santiago truly wanted to try. "Miguel," Santiago said, "can you come back tomorrow?" "I can," the boy replied, "but tomorrow I won't bring dirt. I'll bring other things Grandma taught me." "What other things?" Eduardo asked, curious. "Exercises to reconnect the threads of the mind to the body," Miguel said. "Grandma says the real cure takes a little time. What happened today was only the beginning." That night, Santiago couldn't sleep from anxiety. He kept moving his toes under the blanket, amazed by the sensation he had completely forgotten. With every movement, it felt as if he was reconnecting to a part of himself that had been lost. Eduardo also stayed awake, researching on his computer about alternative treatments and similar cases. He found studies on psychological trauma and conversion paralysis, but nothing explained the speed of Santiago's improvement. The next morning, Miguel arrived right on time at 9 a.m. and carrying a cloth bag tied with string. Santiago was already in the garden, eager to continue what had begun the day before. "Today we're going to work with music and movement," Miguel explained, pulling out a small handmade drum and a bamboo flute. "Music?" Santiago asked, confused. "Grandma says music is the language the body understands better than Spanish," Miguel said, beginning to tap a soft rhythm on the drum. When music enters through the ears, it goes straight to the place where movement is born. Dr. Alberto had arrived early to observe the session. He watched, fascinated, as Miguel began to play simple melodies that made Santiago relax completely. Now try moving your feet to the rhythm of the music, Miguel instructed. Santiago focused and slowly began moving his feet along with the beat. The movements were small but coordinated and intentional. Dr. Alberto took frantic notes in his notebook. Incredible, the doctor murmured. Music therapy really can help with neurological recovery. It's not just music therapy, Miguel corrected. It's faith. Faith that the body remembers how to be happy once the mind stops fighting it. During the session, Miguel spoke more about his grandmother Benita. She had worked as a nurse for 40 years, always specializing in patients the traditional medical system had given up on. After being forced into retirement from the private clinic, she opened a small community center in the Esperanza neighborhood, where she treated people who couldn't afford expensive care. Why did she never contact our family after what happened to Isabel? Eduardo asked. Because she knew you weren't ready to listen, Miguel replied. Grandma always says healing only works when the person is ready to accept they can be okay. That simple but profound philosophy made Eduardo reflect on the years he had spent forcing treatments Santiago rejected. Maybe the problem was never about finding the right treatment, but about waiting for the right moment. On the third day, Miguel brought seeds and small pots. Today we're going to plant, he announced. Every seed you plant is a promise for the future. Plants only grow when they believe it's worth leaving the darkness of the soil to see the sun. Santiago held a sunflower seed in his palm, studying it carefully. It's so tiny, he said, but it will become a flower bigger than you, Miguel smiled. Just like the movements in your feet. Today they're tiny, but one day you'll run. Do you really think I'll be able to run? Santiago asked, his voice mixed with hope and fear. I believe it, Miguel said with such conviction that even Eduardo felt infected by the boy's confidence. While they planted, Miguel shared that he had also lost his mother, though in a different way from Santiago. Mine didn't leave because of an accident, he said, digging a hole for the seed. She left because she couldn't handle taking care of me anymore. Santiago stopped planting and looked at his friend. How so? My dad drank a lot and was always angry. One day he hit her right in front of me and she said she couldn't live like that anymore. She packed a bag and left. She never came back, Miguel explained without self-pity, only as if it were a fact of life. Doesn't it make you sad? Santiago asked. Yes, it does. But Grandma taught me that sadness is like rain. If you let it inside your house, everything rots. But if you let it fall outside, it helps plants grow. Miguel's simple wisdom constantly amazed the adults present. Doña Carmen, watching from the window, told Dr. Alberto she had never seen a child so young with such emotional maturity. He learned to transform pain into healing, the doctor observed. It's an extraordinary ability. That same day, something unexpected happened. While they were planting, Santiago suddenly felt the urge to support himself on the edge of the wheelchair. With great effort, he managed to hold part of his body weight on his legs for a few seconds. I did it, he shouted, thrilled. Yes, you did, Miguel said, but his reaction was calmer than Santiago expected. Tomorrow you'll do a little more. Why didn't you get excited? Santiago asked, slightly disappointed by his friend's response. Because I knew you would do it, Miguel replied. The hard part isn't doing it. The hard part is keeping on trying when it seems like it isn't working. Eduardo watched the interaction and noticed something. For 3 years, he had celebrated every small improvement Santiago made as if it were a miracle, creating huge expectations that made the boy anxious. Miguel, on the other hand, treated every improvement as something natural and expected. On the 4th day, It rained heavily. Miguel couldn't make it to the mansion, and Santiago panicked. He had grown used to his friend's presence, and without it, he began to doubt all the progress he had made. "What if I can't move my feet anymore?" he asked his grandfather, distressed. "Why wouldn't you be able to?" Eduardo questioned. "Because maybe Miguel has some special power, and without him, I'll go back to being the way I was before," Santiago explained, revealing his deepest fear. Eduardo understood it was time for a serious conversation. "Santiago, what changed in you wasn't because of Miguel. It changed because you decided you wanted to try again," Eduardo said gently. "The boy only helped you remember that you're stronger than you imagined." "But what if I can't walk without him?" Santiago insisted. "Then we'll find another way together," Eduardo promised. "But first, why don't you try moving your feet right now, without Miguel being here?" Hesitantly, Santiago tried. To his surprise and relief, his feet responded. The movement was still there, independent of Miguel's presence. When the rain finally stopped and Miguel arrived later, he found Santiago practicing movements on his own. "You practiced without me," Miguel observed with a smile. "I was afraid of losing what I achieved," Santiago admitted. "And did you lose it?" Miguel asked, already knowing the answer. "No," Santiago said, smiling too. "I think I even improved." "Then you learned the most important lesson," Miguel said. "The strength was always inside you. I only helped you find where it was hidden." That afternoon, Miguel suggested an exercise, trying to stand up while holding onto the wheelchair. Santiago was terrified by the idea. "What if I fall?" he asked. "What if you succeed?" Miguel replied. Dr. Alberto was there to ensure the exercise would be safe. Carefully, with full support from the chair, Santiago slowly rose. His legs trembled violently, but they held his weight for nearly 10 seconds. "I'm standing," Santiago whispered, tears running down his face. "I'm really standing." Eduardo couldn't contain his emotion. Seeing his grandson standing again brought him back to memories of when Santiago was small, running through the house, filling every corner with life and joy. "Isabel," Eduardo whispered, looking up at the sky. "He's doing it." Miguel watched the moment in respectful silence, understanding that this victory belonged to the family. Later, when the emotions calmed down, Miguel made a suggestion that surprised everyone. "I think it's time for you to meet my grandmother," he said. "Why?" Eduardo asked. "Because she has something important to give you, and now you're ready to receive it." The trip to the Esperanza neighborhood was the first time in 3 years that Santiago had left the mansion walls. Eduardo drove carefully through narrow streets and simple homes until they reached the blue house Miguel had described. The yard truly was filled with medicinal plants, spices, and flowers of every color. Doña Benita was waiting on the porch, a black woman with gray hair, about 70 years old, with a warm smile and eyes that seemed to hold all the wisdom in the world. "Santiago," she said softly, "it's so good to see you out of that chair." "Do you really know our family?" Eduardo asked, still trying to process the situation. "I met your daughter Isabel in her final days," Doña Benita replied. "A strong and loving woman who suffered deeply because she had fought with her son before traveling." Eduardo felt a knot tighten in his throat. It was the first time in 3 years someone spoke of Isabel as a person, not as a tragedy. "Did she really leave a letter?" Santiago asked, his voice trembling. "Yes, she did," Doña Benita confirmed, walking inside the house and returning with a yellowed envelope. "She asked me to give it to you when you were ready to receive the forgiveness she wanted to give." With shaking hands, Santiago opened the envelope and began reading out loud. "My beloved son, if you are reading this letter, it means you are getting better, and I am so happy. I want you to know that I hold no resentment over our fight. You were right to be angry because I was going to travel without you. Mothers should not leave their children behind, even if it's only for a few days. I love you more than anything in the world, and wherever I am, I will always wish for you to be happy, to run, to play, and to live every day as the precious gift it is. Don't stop living because of me. Live because of me. I love you forever, Mom. The silence that followed was filled only by sobbing. Both Santiago and Eduardo cried the way they hadn't in years, releasing a pain that had crystallized inside them. She wasn't angry with me, Santiago said through tears. She never was, Doña Benita confirmed. She was only worried about how she would fix everything when she returned from the trip. At that moment, something broke inside Santiago for good. The guilt that had bound him for 3 years dissolved like salt in water. He looked at the letter, then at Miguel, then at his grandfather. I want to try walking, Santiago said with a new determination. Now? Eduardo asked, surprised. Now, Santiago confirmed. I want to walk to those yellow flowers, over there in Doña Benita's yard. It was a distance of about 10 meters, impossible for someone who hadn't walked in 3 years. But there was something in Santiago's eyes that made everyone believe that maybe, just maybe, he could do it. With Dr. Alberto on one side and Miguel on the other, Santiago stood up from the wheelchair. His legs trembled, but they held. The first step was uncertain, almost like a controlled fall, but it was a step. The second step was a little stronger, the third even more so. With every step, Santiago gained confidence, and his legs remembered forgotten movements. When he finally reached the yellow flowers, everyone was crying, even Dr. Alberto, who tried to keep his professional composure. I did it, Santiago whispered, leaning on the stem of a giant sunflower. Mom, I did it. Doña Benita walked over and held the boy's hands. Your mother is very proud, she said, and you're going to achieve much more. Dear listener, if you're enjoying this story, take a moment to leave your like and, above all, subscribe to the channel. That helps us a lot, especially those of us who are just starting out. Continuing. The following days brought constant but cautious progress. Santiago practiced short walks every day, always with someone nearby to support him if needed. Dr. Alberto documented each advance, amazed by a recovery that challenged everything he had learned in medical school. Miguel continued visiting daily, but now his role had shifted, from healer to friend. They spent hours talking about everything and nothing, building the friendship that had begun in such an unusual way. It was during one of those conversations that Santiago learned more about Miguel's difficult past. The boy had lived only with his grandmother since he was 5 years old when his mother left. His father appeared sporadically, always drunk and asking for money. It's not easy not having a father or mother present, Miguel confessed one afternoon. But Grandma says family is the one who takes care of us with love, not necessarily the one who shares the same blood. Do you consider your grandmother your mother? Santiago asked. Yes, I do, Miguel replied. And now I also consider you my brother, he added with a smile. The declaration deeply moved Santiago. He had never had close friends. Life in the mansion had always been lonely, and after the accident, he had completely shut himself off from the world. I also consider you my brother, Santiago said, the brother who brought me back to life. Eduardo watched the development of this friendship with contradictory feelings. On one hand, he was grateful for the transformation Miguel had brought to Santiago's life. On the other, he couldn't ignore the enormous social differences between the two boys. One day, while the boys played in the garden, Eduardo called Doña Benita for a conversation. Doña Benita, I'd like to offer something in return for what you and Miguel have done for us, he began. You don't owe us anything, she replied. Seeing the boy happy is payment enough. But I insist, Eduardo said. Maybe I can help financially, or find Miguel a better job when he grows up. Doña Benita interrupted him gently. Mr. Eduardo, you still haven't understood what happened. This wasn't charity or a favor, it was love, and love is not paid back. It is shared. Her words forced Eduardo to reflect on his motivations. Was he trying to pay a debt or truly help? The difference mattered. So how can I share? Eduardo asked, genuinely curious. By letting the boys be friends without worrying about class differences, Doña Benita answered. By letting your grandson learn that happiness has no price. And maybe, if you want, you can help us with the community center. Many people here need what Miguel did for Santiago. That suggestion planted a seed in Eduardo's mind. Over the following days, Eduardo visited Doña Benita's community center and was impressed by her work. With minimal resources, dozens of people sought help for problems traditional medicine couldn't solve. Why not expand this? Eduardo asked during one visit. We lack structure, materials, money, Doña Benita listed. But most of all, we lack people who understand that healing goes beyond medication. And if I provide the structure and the money, Eduardo proposed, could you train more people in your method? Doña Benita looked at him carefully. Do you want to do this for Santiago, or for the people who truly need it? Eduardo thought for a moment before answering. For both. Santiago taught me that when someone receives a second chance, they should use it to help others too. Then we can talk, Doña Benita said with a smile. While the adults planned future projects, a new crisis was approaching. Miguel's father, José López, had discovered that his son now had access to a rich family. He appeared in the Esperanza neighborhood after months of absence, ready to exploit the situation. Mother, José said to Doña Benita, clearly drunk, I heard the boy is taking care of some rich kid. Time to collect payment for the service. José, you will not take advantage of this, Doña Benita said firmly. The boy is my son. I decide what's best for him, José snapped. You abandoned that child years ago, Doña Benita replied. Don't come back now claiming rights. The argument quickly escalated. José was determined to take Miguel to meet the rich family, obviously with intentions of blackmail or extortion. Miguel, who overheard everything while hiding, was terrified. He knew his father was capable of anything when desperate for money. The next day, when Miguel arrived at the mansion, Santiago immediately noticed something was wrong. You're sad, Santiago said. What happened? Miguel told him about his father's threat, and Santiago became furious. For the first time in 3 years, he felt a real protective anger. He can't take you, Santiago shouted. You're my family now. He's my father, Miguel said sadly. I think he has the right. Rights are earned by caring, not by abandoning, Santiago answered, with a maturity that surprised even himself. That night, Santiago told everything to his grandfather. Eduardo was worried, but also determined to protect the boy who had saved his grandson. I'm going to talk to my lawyers, Eduardo said, but Santiago interrupted him. Grandpa, what if we offer Miguel's father help instead of fighting him? Eduardo looked at his grandson, surprised. What do you mean? If he needs money, maybe what he really needs is work, Santiago said. And if he gets a job and stops drinking, maybe he can become a better father for Miguel. Santiago's wisdom, clearly influenced by Doña Benita's philosophy, impressed Eduardo deeply. Instead of using power and money to push the problem away, maybe they could use their resources to solve it at the root. The next morning, Eduardo went to the Esperanza neighborhood to look for José López. He found the man in a local bar, still drunk from the night before. Mr. José, Eduardo called politely. José turned around, swaying slightly. So you're the rich man my son is taking care of, José slurred. Excellent. Let's negotiate the price. I came to propose something different, Eduardo said calmly. "I came to offer you a job." Jose blinked, confused. "A job? What are you talking about?" "A real job," Eduardo continued, "with a fixed salary at one of my companies. But there are conditions." "What conditions?" Jose asked, trying to focus his blurry eyes. "You must stop drinking completely. You must follow medical treatment. And you must allow Miguel to keep living with Doña Benita while you recover." Jose let out a sarcastic laugh. "And why would I do that? I can make much more money exploiting your grandson's situation." Eduardo remained calm. "Because exploitation lasts only a short time," he said. "But having a son who respects you and wants to be close to you lasts forever. The choice is yours, easy money now, or a real family for the rest of your life." Eduardo's words touched something deep inside Jose. For the first time in years, he saw himself through his son's eyes, an absent father, an addict who only showed up to cause trouble. "What if I can't stop drinking?" Jose asked, suddenly sincere. "Then we'll try again. And again," Eduardo replied, "as many times as necessary, but you have to want to try." Jose stayed silent for a long time. Then finally he looked at Eduardo with tears in his eyes. "I want to be a better father," he admitted. "I just don't know how." "No one is born knowing," Eduardo said. "I also made many mistakes with my daughter, but it's never too late to learn." The agreement was sealed with a handshake. Eduardo would provide treatment for alcoholism and a job in one of his companies in another city, far from the local temptations. Jose would be allowed to visit Miguel on weekends, but only when he was sober. When Miguel heard about the agreement, he was stunned. "My father really accepted?" he asked in disbelief. "He accepted," Eduardo confirmed, "but his recovery will depend only on him. We're simply giving him an opportunity." "And what if he doesn't make it?" Miguel asked worriedly. "Then you still have your grandmother and us as your family," Santiago said. "You will never be alone again." That promise sealed a friendship that rose above every social and economic barrier. In the months that followed, life in the mansion gained a new and joyful routine. Miguel spent entire afternoons there, not as a therapist anymore, but as Santiago's best friend. Santiago progressed from short walks to running freely across the garden. Dr. Alberto documented the entire recovery process and wrote a medical article about the role of emotional bonding in recovering from psychological paralysis. Santiago's case became a study in several universities. Doña Benita, with Eduardo's financial support, expanded her community center. They created a pioneering program that combined traditional medicine with alternative therapies and emotional support. Dozens of families benefited. Jose Lopez, after 6 months of treatment and work, visited his son for the first time completely sober. The reunion was emotional but cautious. Miguel had learned not to create high expectations, but he allowed hope to slowly grow. "Dad," Miguel said during one of the visits, "you're different." "I'm trying to be the father you deserve," Jose replied, eyes filled with tears. "I know it will take time for you to trust me again, but I will prove that I've changed." Jose's recovery journey was slow and full of obstacles, but he persisted. Having a dignified job and the chance to rebuild his relationship with his son gave him the motivation to remain sober. 1 year after Santiago and Miguel first met, Eduardo organized a party in the mansion's garden. It was a celebration, 1 year of Santiago's recovery and 6 months of Jose's sobriety. "Who would have thought that dirt on a child's feet could change so many things?" Dr. Alberto commented, watching Santiago run freely through the garden with Miguel. "It wasn't the dirt," Doña Benita said with a smile. "It was love. The dirt was only the way love found a path to reach him." Santiago, sweaty and happy after a race, walked up to the group of adults. "Grandpa," he said, "can I ask you something?" Of course, Eduardo answered. Why do you think I had to get sick for you to learn how to be a better grandfather? The question struck Eduardo like lightning. He had never thought about it that way. What do you mean? He asked. You only started really talking to me and understanding me after Miguel appeared, Santiago explained. Before that, you were only worried about curing me, not about knowing me. Eduardo fell silent, processing the sharp observation. You're right, he admitted. I was so desperate to solve your problem that I forgot to listen to what you truly needed. I needed someone to believe I could be okay, Santiago said. Miguel believed, even before he truly knew me. Miguel, who had approached to hear the conversation, smiled shyly. Grandma always says believing in someone is the first medicine, he commented. And she's right, Eduardo said, hugging both boys. You have taught me more about true family than I learned in 60 years. The party continued until nightfall. Children from the Esperanza neighborhood were invited and played freely in the mansion garden, breaking invisible barriers that had existed for generations. Doña Carmen, watching the joyful movement, said to Doña Benita, I've never seen this house so full of life. A house without happy children is like a garden without flowers, Doña Benita replied. It may be beautiful, but it has no soul. When everyone left and night finally arrived, Eduardo found Santiago in his room, staring out the window. What are you thinking about? The grandfather asked. I'm thinking that Mom would be happy seeing all this, Santiago replied. The house full of children, me running, you smiling. She really would be very happy, Eduardo agreed, and proud to see the brave young man you're becoming. Grandpa, Santiago asked, can I ask you something about Mom? Of course. Did you also blame yourself for the fight she had with me? Eduardo let out a deep sigh. Yes, I blamed myself, he admitted. I thought that if I had insisted more for her not to travel, none of this would have happened. And how did you stop blaming yourself? Santiago asked. By watching you heal, Eduardo answered honestly. I realized that staying trapped in guilt doesn't honor the memory of the ones we love. Living well is what honors them. Santiago nodded, absorbing his grandfather's wisdom. I think Mom would be happy knowing that so much suffering turned into so many good things, the boy reflected. She definitely would, Eduardo said, kissing his grandson's forehead. Good night, champion. Good night, Grandpa. While Santiago slept peacefully, Eduardo stayed awake thinking about how life can change unexpectedly. A year earlier, he had been a bitter man, focused only on medical treatments, desperate attempts at healing. Now, he was part of a much larger community, connected to people he never imagined he would know. The transformation hadn't benefited only Santiago. The entire family, including the extended family that now included Miguel, Doña Benita, and even José, had grown and healed from old traumas. The next day, Miguel arrived with a proposal. Santiago, I want to take you to see where I live. Really? Santiago asked. Don't you live in your grandmother's house? Yes, I do, Miguel replied, but I want to show you the whole neighborhood, introduce you to my friends, if you want, of course. The proposal made Santiago nervous. He had never interacted with children from a social environment so different from his own. Will they like me? He asked insecurely. Yes, Miguel assured him. They already know about our friendship. Everyone is curious to meet you. Eduardo, who overheard the conversation, offered to drive the boys, but Miguel suggested something different. What if we walk there? He proposed. It's only a half-hour walk, and that way Santiago can really get to know the road. The idea of walking for half an hour frightened Santiago, but it also excited him. It would be his first big walk since recovering. Do you think I can do it? He asked his friend. I know you can, Miguel replied with his usual confidence. The walk began slowly, with Eduardo driving behind the boys for safety. Little by little, Santiago gained confidence and rhythm. By the time they arrived at the Esperanza neighborhood, he was tired, but thrilled. "I did it!" Santiago shouted. "I walked more than 2 kilometers!" The children in the neighborhood greeted Santiago with curiosity that quickly turned into friendship. They were less interested in his wealth and more fascinated by the fact that he had started walking again with Miguel's help. "Is it true you hadn't walked in 3 years?" a girl named Lucia asked. "It's true," Santiago confirmed. "And Miguel?" a boy named Carlos asked. "Did he heal you all by himself?" "He helped me heal," Santiago corrected, already showing the wisdom he had learned. The kids were impressed and began seeing Miguel like a local hero. Miguel, naturally humble, felt embarrassed by the attention. During the afternoon in the neighborhood, Santiago experienced a life completely different from his own. He played in the street, ate fruit straight from a tree, played soccer on a dirt field. It was a revelation. "I've never had so much fun," Santiago admitted to Miguel at the end of the day. "Here you learn that happiness doesn't need much," Miguel explained. "It only needs friends and imagination." Eduardo, watching everything from a distance, realized his grandson was learning lessons about life that no expensive private school could ever teach. On the way back, Santiago made a proposal that surprised his grandfather. "Grandpa, can I study at the neighborhood school a few times a week?" "What?" Eduardo asked, shocked. "How so?" "To learn different things, to have different friends, to become a more complete person." The idea was radical by the family's standards, but Eduardo seriously considered it. "Do you think you could adapt to public school?" he asked. "With Miguel's help and the new friends," Santiago said confidently. "Yes." Doña Benita, who walked beside them, supported the idea. "Children need to know the real world," she said. "They can't grow up inside a bubble. Otherwise, they never learn to value what they have." After several conversations with educators and visits to the local school, Eduardo decided to try it. Santiago would attend public school 3 mornings a week and spend the rest of his time with private tutors. The experience was transformative. Santiago discovered that learning alongside children from different realities enriched his understanding of the world. He also began using his resources to help classmates who struggled materially. "Can I lend my old books to anyone who needs them?" he asked one day. "Of course," Eduardo answered, proud of his grandson's spontaneous generosity. "And can I invite some friends to study in our library sometimes?" "Of course you can." Little by little, the mansion became an informal educational support center for children in the region. Eduardo hired additional teachers to provide free tutoring, creating opportunities that had never existed before. Miguel became a bridge between the two worlds, helping Santiago navigate the reality of public school and helping the neighborhood kids feel comfortable inside the mansion. 6 months after Santiago began studying at the local public school, he proposed something even more ambitious. "Grandpa, what if we create a school that combines the best of both worlds?" he suggested during dinner. "What would that look like?" Eduardo asked, intrigued. "A school where rich and poor children study together," Santiago explained, "where everyone has access to the best teachers, but also learns about real life. A place where no one grows up thinking money is the most important thing in the world." The idea was revolutionary and challenging, but Eduardo had learned not to underestimate his grandson's wisdom. "It would be expensive and complicated," Eduardo said thoughtfully. "It would," Santiago agreed, "but it would change the lives of many people, just like Miguel changed mine." Doña Benita, who was present at the dinner, smiled. "Boy, are you thinking of planting a seed that will become a very big tree?" she asked. "Do you think it's a bad idea?" Santiago asked. I think it's an idea your mother would be very proud of, she replied. Doña Benita's validation meant a lot to Santiago. She had become a maternal figure in his life, filling part of the void left by his mother's death. Eduardo decided to investigate the project's feasibility. He hired education consultants, visited innovative schools, studied models of social inclusion. After months of research, he concluded that the project was ambitious, but possible. It would require a significant investment, but he had the resources. "We're going to do it," Eduardo announced one night. "We're going to create a school that honors everything we've learned about breaking barriers." Santiago was ecstatic. Miguel, more cautious, asked an important question. "And what if it doesn't work?" he asked. "What if rich and poor kids can't understand each other?" "Then we'll help them learn," Santiago replied. "Just like you helped me learn how to walk again." The school project became a family passion. Eduardo used his business experience to structure the enterprise. Doña Benita contributed her wisdom about human development, and the boys actively participated in the planning. "What are we going to name the school?" Santiago asked during one of the planning meetings. "What about Seeds of Hope School?" Miguel suggested. "Why that name?" Eduardo asked. "Because it was by planting seeds that Santiago began believing he could grow again," Miguel explained. "And every child needs a seed of hope in order to grow well." The name was approved unanimously. The construction of the school took 2 years. During that time, Santiago grew stronger, physically and emotionally. He became an active social teenager, deeply aware of social issues. Miguel also grew, keeping his natural wisdom, but gaining academic confidence. With the educational support he now received, and thanks to his father's recovery process, Jose managed to remain sober and rebuild a healthy relationship with his son. On the day of the inauguration of Seeds of Hope School, Eduardo gave an emotional speech. "This school was born when 2 very different boys met in a garden," he said, looking at Santiago and Miguel among the crowd. "One was lost in sadness, the other was full of love to give. They taught me that true healing comes from human connection, not money or sophisticated medicine." The crowd, made up of parents from all social classes, applauded emotionally. "Today we begin an experiment that will teach our children that differences enrich, not divide, that generosity is more important than wealth, and that all of us have something valuable to teach and something to learn." Doña Benita, as the guest of honor, also spoke. 45 years caring for people taught me something," she said. "A child who grows up with love and opportunity becomes an adult who builds a better world. This school will form builders of a better world." At the end of the ceremony, Santiago and Miguel planted the first tree in the school's garden, a sunflower, in honor of the yellow flowers that marked Santiago's recovery. "Do you remember the first thing you ever said to me?" Santiago asked as he covered the seeds with dirt. "I do," Miguel replied with a smile. "Did you know it would work?" Santiago asked. "I didn't know," Miguel admitted, "but I believed. Grandma always says believing is the first step for any miracle to happen." And now," Santiago asked, "do you believe our school will work?" Miguel looked around, seeing children from completely different backgrounds playing together in the schoolyard. "Yes," he said, "because if we manage to become brothers, even though we were so different, these children will also manage to become one big family." 5 years after the opening, Seeds of Hope School became a national model of inclusive education. The children who studied there became young people who were aware, empathetic, and determined to break social barriers. Santiago, at 17, became a young community leader, dedicating his time to social projects and speaking at conferences about resilience and inclusion. Miguel, at 15, stood out academically and dreamed of studying medicine to follow his grandmother's path. Eduardo, now 68, divided his time between his businesses and social projects. He discovered that helping others brought him a satisfaction that financial success had never provided. Doña Benita, now 75, remained active at the expanded community center and served as an educational advisor to the school. She became a respected and beloved figure to hundreds of families. José López celebrated 5 years of sobriety and worked as a supervisor at one of Eduardo's companies. He had fully reconciled with his son and married a nurse he met during his treatment. On a sunny afternoon, exactly 7 years after Santiago and Miguel first met, they returned to the mansion garden where everything had begun. "Do you remember the first thing you ever said to me?" Santiago asked, now tall, strong, and confident. "I'm going to put dirt on your foot, and you're going to walk," Miguel replied, smiling at the memory. "You kept the promise," Santiago said. "You didn't just make me walk, you made me fly." "We did it together," Miguel corrected him. "I only brought the dirt. You decided to believe." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the garden where children from the school now played freely, crossing invisible barriers that once seemed impossible to break. "Miguel," Santiago said, "thank you for saving my life." "Santiago," Miguel replied, "thank you for saving mine too." "How so?" Santiago asked, surprised. "You gave me a real family," Miguel said. "You gave me opportunities I never would have had. You showed me that dreams can come true when we work together." Eduardo, watching the two young men from the mansion window, smiled with tears in his eyes. Isabel would have been proud to see how her son had transformed, from a wounded boy into a young man who dedicated his life to healing others. Doña Carmen, now retired but still living on the property, approached the boys with a smile. "You know you're famous, right?" she said. "What do you mean?" Miguel asked. "That reporter who came last week said your story is inspiring social programs all over the country," Doña Carmen explained. "There are schools in Guadalajara, Cancun, and Mexico City copying the model of Seeds of Hope School." "Seriously?" Santiago asked, astonished. "And that's not all," Doña Carmen added. "They're also making a movie about you." The two looked at each other in shock. "A movie about us?" Miguel asked, incredulous. "About your story," Doña Carmen corrected. "About how friendship can heal what medicine cannot." That night, during a family dinner that now included Miguel, Doña Benita, and José, Eduardo made a toast. "7 years ago, my world collapsed when I lost my daughter," he said with emotion. 6.5 years ago, it collapsed again when I believed I was going to lose my grandson too. But 6 years ago, 2 boys taught me that destruction can be transformed into construction, that pain can become love, and that family has nothing to do with blood. He looked at each person around the table. "You are my family. You are my healing. You are proof that miracles happen when we open our hearts to the impossible." Everyone raised their glasses, deeply moved. After dinner, Santiago and Miguel went upstairs to Santiago's bedroom, now with 2 beds, in case his friend ever wanted to sleep at the mansion. "Miguel," Santiago said before falling asleep, "do you think our friendship was destiny?" "I think it was love," Miguel answered. "Grandma always says true love finds a way to reach where it's needed." "She's right," Santiago agreed. "And you know what else?" Santiago added. "What?" "I think we're still going to do many more things together. Big things. Things that will help a lot of people." "Of course," Miguel agreed, "because when you bring together faith, hope, and love, everything becomes possible." They slept peacefully, dreaming of futures full of endless possibilities, knowing they had transformed not only their own lives, but the lives of hundreds of people around them. And somewhere between sleep and waking, both of them felt Isabel's warm presence, smiling proudly at the extraordinary sons she had left in the world. One by blood, one by choice, both united by a love that crossed all barriers and transformed pain into hope, loneliness into family, and impossibility into miracle. Dear listener, if you're enjoying this story, take a moment to leave your like and, above all, subscribe to the channel. Your support motivates us to keep sharing stories that inspire and move people. Continuing. 10 years after the first meeting in the garden, Santiago was graduating in psychology with a specialization in childhood trauma, while Miguel was completing medical school. Both had chosen careers that would allow them to continue the healing mission that had begun between them. Seeds of Hope School had become a network of 15 units across Mexico, serving more than 3,000 children. Their educational model was being studied by international universities. Eduardo, now 72 and partially retired, devoted most of his time to the Isabel Ramirez Foundation, an organization he created in his daughter's memory to fund projects of social inclusion and education. Doña Benita, now 80, remained active and had become a kind of matriarch of the extended community that had grown around the family. Her community center was now a medical social complex that treated more than 10,000 people a year free of charge. Jose Lopez, with 8 years of sobriety, had become a counselor for chemical dependency and was happily married. He and Miguel had built a close, healthy relationship based on mutual respect and genuine love. During the graduation party for the two young men, held in the mansion garden where it all began, hundreds of people gathered to celebrate not only academic achievements, but the extraordinary journey that had transformed so many lives. "I want to give a special thanks," Santiago said during his graduation speech, "to a boy who came into my life when I needed him most, and taught me that true healing comes from the heart, not from medical books." He looked at Miguel in the crowd. "Miguel, you taught me that faith moves mountains, and today, seeing all these people here, seeing all the lives touched by our friendship, I know you were right. We moved an entire mountain." The audience erupted in applause. Miguel stepped onto the stage for his own speech. 10 years ago, I was just a poor boy who learned from his grandmother that love heals," he began. "Today, I am a graduated doctor, son of a recovered father, brother by choice to my best friend. But most importantly, I learned that miracles are not magic. They are the work of people who refuse to give up on one another." Tears flowed freely across the faces of the crowd. Our story began with a promise. "I'm going to put dirt on your foot, and you're going to walk." Today I make a new promise. I will dedicate my life to planting seeds of hope in other wounded hearts, because I learned that there is no pain so great that love cannot heal. When the speeches ended, the two families, the family of blood and the family of choice, gathered for a historic photograph. It was an extraordinary mosaic of people from different ages, social classes and backgrounds, united by the invisible thread of love and hope. Dr. Alberto, now a university professor and director of a clinic specialized in psychological trauma, approached the two young men. "You know you revolutionized medicine, right?" he said with a smile. "What do you mean?" Santiago asked. "The treatment protocol we developed based on your experience is being used in hospitals around the world," Dr. Alberto explained. "Dozens of children with similar trauma have been healed using techniques born right here in this garden." "Seriously?" Miguel asked, impressed. "Seriously, you proved that medicine and love aren't separate things. They are partners." Later, when everyone had gone home, Santiago and Miguel walked to the exact place where they had met a decade earlier. "Do you regret anything?" Santiago asked. "Nothing," Miguel replied without hesitation. "And you?" Miguel asked. "Only one thing," Santiago said thoughtfully. "What?" "That it took me 3 years to believe in you," Santiago answered with a smile. "Imagine how many good things we could have done if I had accepted your help the first day." But maybe you weren't ready that first day, Miguel reflected. Grandma always says everything happens at the right moment. Your grandma is right, as always. They stayed quiet, comfortably, watching the stars begin to appear in the sky. Miguel, Santiago said after a while, do you think our mission is finished? Our mission, Miguel asked. To help people heal. Miguel thought for a moment before answering. I think our mission is only beginning, he said. Now we have education, knowledge, and a network of people who believe in us. Imagine what we can do. Where do we go from here? Santiago asked. Wherever love takes us, Miguel replied. Just like it took me to you that day. And what if I tell you I have a crazy plan? Santiago said with a playful smile. I'd say your crazy plans always work, Miguel laughed. What is it? What if we open an international clinic specialized in cases doctors consider impossible? Santiago proposed. A clinic where traditional medicine and emotional healing work together? Miguel asked, his eyes shining. Exactly, Santiago said. With a multidisciplinary team, a human-centered environment, and free care for those who can't pay. It would be expensive, Miguel observed. It would, Santiago agreed. But Grandpa always says money well spent is an investment in the future. And what better future than a world where no one has to suffer alone? Where would the clinic be? Miguel asked, clearly interested. Right here, Santiago answered. In the city where our story began, so other children like us can meet and heal each other. The idea was ambitious, but no more ambitious than the school they had created together. And if they had turned a chance encounter into a national education movement, why couldn't they turn their personal experience into a new model of human-centered medicine? When do we start? Miguel asked, his question already carrying the answer. Tomorrow, Santiago replied, smiling. Always tomorrow, because every new day is an opportunity to plant another seed of hope. They embraced, two brothers by choice, united by a purpose that had grown far beyond their individual lives. The journey that began with one wounded boy in a wheelchair and another brave boy with hands full of dirt had become a lifelong mission that would touch hundreds of thousands of people in the years to come. And as they walked back home under a starry sky, both knew their story was far from over. In fact, it was only beginning to write its most important chapters, because when true love finds a genuine purpose, there is no limit to the miracles that can happen. And in the hearts of two young men who learned early that healing comes from love, lived the promise that many other wounded hearts would still find their way back to the light. The damp soil of the garden that once served as a remedy for feet that had forgotten how to walk was still blessed by the footprints of hundreds of children who learned that differences do not divide. They multiply joy when hearts are open to love. And somewhere, in the silence of the night, Isabel's gentle voice whispered through the wind, carrying words of a mother's pride for two extraordinary sons who transformed their pain into strength to heal the world. The end. Now tell us what you thought of this story of overcoming and friendship, proof that the greatest miracles are born from hearts that refuse to give up on one another. If you also believe in the power of faith and love to transform lives, leave your comment telling us which part touched your heart the most. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Your participation motivates us to keep sharing stories that inspire and move you.